trying to write a real book. I'm not a real book. I mean, a book that has paragraphs about motivation, in particular the differences between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. And extrinsic motivation meaning you do something for the reward. Intrinsic motivation, you do something for the joy and challenge of the task itself. And basically 30 years of research, pretty darn good research, that shows that these extrinsic motivators work in only a very, very narrow band of circumstances. And yet we use them in the whole spectrum of circumstances. And that, and where they often have a corrosive effect. And that these intrinsic motivators are actually much more powerful, and yet we tend to dismiss them, not even think about them. And a lot of this research was interesting. A lot of the research comes in sports, and so there's this notion about like great athletes, really competitive, want to get the prize and so forth, and that is partly true. But what really drives the highest performing athletes is intrinsic motivation. Is basically benchmarking against themselves, getting greater and greater mastery in what they do, the joy of the thing itself, and so it's like it's sort of a head fake to continue the sports thing here, that because they get these extrinsic rewards, there's this notion that, well, that's of course what they're after, but the extrinsic rewards are in some ways the byproduct of this intense intrinsic motivation. And if even you look at like crazy people like Mike Tyson, Mike Tyson is like this great historian of boxing because he loves boxing. He wants to know everything there is about boxing, and so he like knows more about boxing history. You wouldn't think that he knows more about boxing history than anybody else because he's so intrinsically motivated about boxing. He's a nut, but he's so intrinsically motivated about boxing. Or you look at someone like Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods is so profoundly intrinsically motivated. Tiger Woods goes out there and he's basically playing against himself, and he ends up. And so these really, really great athletes. Also, musicians and visual artists too end up being very intrinsically motivated that way too. These people who perform at very high levels are actually in some ways not ignoring, but they're just all the extrinsic things that people think that they're after they're out there and they're nice to have, but they really operate as acknowledgments rather than as goals. And if you buy this, if you rent this, it turns on its head reward systems within companies. It turns on its head how we grade people in schools. So that's the thing that I'm working on now. It has paragraphs, so it takes me longer.